Sorry, guys, we had an interruption, but we're back. We are again covering the Lori Vallow Daybell trial, and we're gonna start talking. So we covered the opening statements. Now we're just gonna go into some of the witnesses, and I think one of the most impactful part of this week's witness list of the people that offer their testimonies was the detective who was present when they found the bodies of the children. And this is the part of the trial where the pictures of the autopsies were shown, where it was really told in detail how it happened, how they found the bodies, and where they were taken, how the autopsies were performed, and all this details. So, and Lauren, I didn't include any audio clips of this because I didn't want it to be so graphic, but I did want Lauren to talk about her experience, during this day of the trial.
Yeah, this was a very emotional day of the trial. To be in the courtroom was very overwhelming during this time. They, just trigger warning. It was hard. There were graphic photos shown of the children, and it's interesting. My background's journalism, and we cover hard stories a lot. We covered stories of children dying, and you put your game face on and you just keep reporting. That's what you do when things are hard. You're working and you're okay until all of a sudden you're not okay. And it got to a point where when I finally just broke down myself, we'd gone through most everything, and then they showed a close-up photo of JJ's face, and it was awful. It was awful. He had a piece of duct tape going from jawline to jawline across his mouth. And, you have to wonder why he had that on there to keep him from making noise, or what this little boy went through. And sorry if this is TMI, but it was awful. Relatives were in there. JJ's brothers, older brothers, half brothers, Charles's sons, were in the courtroom during this. Larry Woodcock, JJ's grandfather, was in the courtroom during this. Kay Woodcock had left, as had others, but some stayed. Many were crying in the courtroom. Larry Woodcock had his hands in his face, sobbing. Right after they showed all these photos and exhibits, they called for a 10-minute recess. And as people walked out, like I said, JJ's older brothers were just sobbing. Everyone was just, it was really sad. And there was a point, jurors were crying. At one point, you can even actually hear in the audio on our channel, someone says, "Can you get her a tissue?" And people said, "Who was that? Who were they asking?" I said, "Well, a juror was given a tissue." A woman, jurors were looking up at the ceiling, blinking their eyes, trying to stop. It was one of the most emotional days I've ever seen in a trial, in a courtroom, covering many stories. And it's a day I'll never forget.
Do you want to talk, Lauren, about what was Lori's demeanor when they were showing these pictures? And I heard something happened where at the middle of the day where she wouldn't want to come back. She wanted to give up her right of being in the courtroom that day, which she was denied by the judge. Do you want to tell us about that, and what did you observe on Lori's reaction to all of this?
Yes, it was behavior from Lori Daybell that we've never seen before. While the past 3 years, while court has been televised for people on Zoom, on YouTube, many people have seen Lori in court, and she seems to like it. She smiles at the camera. Again, this I actually think is one reason the judge might have decided not to stream this. She seemed to like the stage a little bit. And this is something we've never, ever seen with Lori, that she had her head down and turned. So it was lunch break. So everyone had a 45-minute lunch break. we all gather back in right on time, because if you're not on time, you don't get back into the courtroom. So everyone's in there and we're waiting, and court isn't starting. And finally, it's, attorneys come out and say, we have an argument. We need to make outside of the jury can't see this argument. So don't bring them in yet, or they need to leave. I can't remember if they left or they just hadn't brought them in yet. And people are wondering what is going on. And they come out and they argue and they say, our client, the defense, our client is upset. She wants to waive her presence at this time. She's having an emotional time. She doesn't want to be here seeing these photos. We'd like to waive her presence at this trial. And of course, as you can imagine, that incited a lot of emotion too, and gasps in the courtroom, because here's a woman on trial for the murder of her children, and yet she doesn't want to be in here, at this moment, looking at pictures with us. She finally, so right, as you point out, Gerardo, the judge then decided that she needed to be present. The prosecution and defense both argued for quite a while, and then she had to come back in. And throughout that time, she was upset. She was very, I don't know if it was like sadness. I didn't see sadness. Maybe I could say distraught emotions. She was definitely distraught. I don't know if she was angry. I don't know if she was shamed. I don't know if she was upset about a lack of control. Clearly, Lori is a person none of us really understand, because why are we here, if we understood her? And she turned her face the whole time. She wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. She wouldn't look at anyone. It was sort of like this in her chair, if you can kind of see, turning her head and making it known she did not want to be there. And she stayed that way for the entirety of court until it adjourned at 3:30.
Wow. It is really, I think, from what I understand, the jurors are looking directly at Lori. Is that right, Lauren?
Yes, that's exactly right. The jurors are actually facing Lori, and she is facing them. They're on opposite sides of this room, but they are facing each other.
Right. And so I wanted to get Brenton's opinion on what do juries, how much weight does he have for juries, the demeanor of the person, who's being accused of these crimes, when evidence like this type is being presented?
It seems to have a lot of weight. Of course, not just when evidence like this is being presented, but in general, defense lawyers are often concerned about whether their client will seem likable to the jury, and this is sometimes unfair. Some of us have RBF. Some of us, like, we just naturally scowl, or like we're not attractive, or so sometimes jurors can look at a defendant in an unfair way, and our system kind of assumes that juries are really good at judging people's demeanor, that juries are really good at telling whether or not someone is lying, and studies show that it's like a coin toss. If they don't know this person, they're kind of just guessing. So jurors give a lot of weight to the demeanor of the defendant, to how they look in certain situations, and sometimes it's accurate and helpful, and sometimes it's not.
Right. Yeah. And Mindy, it's my understanding you were not in this part of the trial, but would you like to talk about your observations of Lori's demeanor in the time you were there?
Yeah, I wasn't there on that particular day, but I kept a close eye on Lori as much as I could see her. Depending on where you were sitting in the courtroom, you had a better view of Lori. I honestly didn't see a lot of reaction out of Lori, except for, I think the most reaction I saw was on the day that Zulema Pastena testified, which was on Friday. And there were a few kind of, eyebrow raises and reactions that day. But overall, other than just kind of chatting with her lawyers and taking notes, she hasn't been super reactive from what I've been able to observe.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, and especially, if it's your children and you're seeing pictures of them, you would expect some kind of reaction. The fact that she just didn't want to look, she was never observed crying or, showing any kind of sadness or emotion like that is kind of it's kind of hard, you know. I if I was a juror, it would be I would be questioning why the person that's being accused of these crimes is not showing any kind of emotion. But let's move on to the next part of that we're going to talk about today, and we're just going to go for 20 more minutes. We're going to talk about Melanie Gibb, and I would like Mindy to, if you can, if you want, to give us an explanation or a brief summary of who Melanie Gibb is, and then we're gonna play some clips of her testimony. Is that okay with you, Mindy?
Melanie Gibb was part of this group that would go to the Preparing People conferences. She had written books, and I can't remember if she knew Chad before Lori met Chad. I believe perhaps they had met before, but she eventually became very close friends with Lori. And I think if you're doing a tier system of this group, I think it went Chad, Lori, and I think I would list Melanie as the next person on the tier. She was very high up in all of these ideas and thoughts that eventually contributed to all of the events of this case. And I think she knew a lot about everything that was going on behind the scenes. Somebody else, Lauren, you may have more thoughts about Melanie.
Well, I like that you actually said that you thought that she was like the top tier, you know, it went Chad, Lori, and then Melanie, because they would clearly agree with you, because what day was it in trial? We were seeing the trust levels that Chad and Lori had created. I think it was Chad that he had written down everybody's vibrations, and the higher your vibrations, the more trust level you had with the group. And Melanie Gibb was tip top as far as on the trust level. I think she was very much enmeshed with this group of believers, although on stand she tries to emphasize over and over again that she didn't totally believe it, which I don't even know if that helps her, right? I would love, you know, I would love thoughts on that, because she would always say, well, I don't know if I totally believed it. And I thought, girl, like, there are children that are dead.
Yeah.
And if you didn't totally believe this, we're angrier, or I'm angrier, because if you sat by and let this happen, not realizing what was happening, when you were like, I'm not sure if this is true or not, then you just went even, you know, you just really ticked me off. So, but that is who she is. She was very, I would call her Lori Daybell's best friend. And she was actually living at Lori's house around the time Charles was killed, and Lori asked her to leave so that, her brother Alex could come spend the night and protect her, you know, and then Charles lost his life. So yeah, I agree with Mindy. And so we were all, a lot of people are angry at Melanie Gibb as far as public or people that follow this case closely. Admittedly, I'm going to say that because we feel like she knew a lot and she didn't do anything.
Yeah. Something that I found interesting is that Melanie gave her testimony of, you know, the timeline of events and things that she was involved with, and a lot of these things you know, are related with other events that this other person that we're going to talk about, Zulema, was also involved in. And to me, the way Melanie presented what happened compared to what Zulema did, it was very clear to me that Melanie was giving kind of like a whitewashed version of what actually happened, or the beliefs and the kinds of rituals that they were performing, compared to where Zulema gave really, you know, bizarre details on that. I'm curious to hear. I'm seeing Mindy nodding. What she thinks about that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Gerardo. Melanie's testimony was full of, I can't recall, or perhaps, just all of these really vague terms. And then Zulema took the stand the next day, and they were all at all of these same events at the same time, including these casting out of evil spirits. And in my experience, I'm thinking, if I ever participated in the casting out of an evil spirit, I think I would remember a lot about what that entails.
Yeah.
And so it just really discredited Melanie, in my opinion, because Zulema got up there and was able to have a lot more details about what this happened, or about these events that occurred, that Melanie was also at every single one of those events. And so, yeah, Melanie's testimony had a lot of holes, and in my opinion was not completely forthcoming in any sense.
Yeah, let's play one of the clips that I prepared, just to give our viewers and listeners a flavor of, you know, the kinds of things that she was testifying about.
Did you observe Lori and Chad together during that weekend?
Yes.
And do you recall the context of where you observed them together?
So they were at the conference and I saw them interacting. And then whatever time he arrived at her house, and he ended up staying at her house.
So your understanding was Chad stayed at Lori's house in Arizona?
That's right.
Do you know if Charles was present during that?
I believe he was out of town.
Do you know if Charles and Lori were still married at that point?
They were.
Do you know if Chad was still married at that point?
Yes, he was.
Do you recall Lori telling you anything in November regarding she and Chad's relationship?
Yes.
And what did she tell you?
She told me that they had been married, I believe, 4 or 5 times. And she would go into different details with me about who she was, what character she was, and what character he was.
Do you recall if she said anything to you about going to the temple?
Yes.
And what did she tell you regarding going to the temple?
She would tell me that, yes, that weekend that he came to Arizona, that they met in the temple together, and they were somewhere in there, like in just like maybe a waiting area room, that they were sealed together by, I believe Moroni was there, and possibly, I believe she said Jesus Christ, and that that relationship they had multiple lives, it was kind of like a reunited again. They got to be sealed there. It wasn't in a sealing room officially done by the church or anything like that.
And can you explain a little bit about the relevance of being sealed?
The teachings of our church talk about when you're sealed to a companion on this earth, that you are sealed for time and all eternity.
And when you say the teachings of our church, are you comfortable sharing what church you're a member of?
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
All right. So something that jumped out to me, and just based on what Mindy and Lauren just said about Melanie and what I explained, that it seemed to me like she was whitewashing a lot of, you know, the belief system that they held. I'm sure probably a lot of it has changed since for Melanie. But in the Mormon church, the law of chastity is something really important, especially if someone is sealed, you know, to a living partner. It's something that, you know, it's really important for Mormons, especially, you know, Orthodox, really believing members of the church. So the fact that she allowed, or she was okay with Chad staying at Lori's house and spent the night without Charles knowing about it, it tells me that she had to really believe that Jesus Christ and Moroni sealed Chad and Lori together, and that they were married in past lives. Otherwise, why would someone allow that and not say anything? I just don't see an Orthodox member of the church being okay with that. But I'm curious to know what Lauren thinks about it.
Well, I think this is actually a really important part of the story because, Mormon theology, LDS beliefs, we have a history of break-off groups, fringe groups, new religions, or whatever you want to call it, that realize or believe that we should still be practicing, the LDS should still be practicing polygamy. And of course, the FLDS believe that actually, the LDS church broke off, and they're the ones that continue this practice of polygamy. And I think many have always wondered, well, this case doesn't seem to have to do with polygamy. It's a different thing. And right here we see, no, there is polygamy involved. This is another case about Mormon polygamy, LDS polygamy, because here you have a man married to another woman, Tammy Daybell, and a woman, Lori, married to a man named Charles, and they are going to the LDS temple to be sealed for time and all eternity while still married to the other spouses, because they believe that they were with each other in past lives. It might be a little bit unique or different. They're not all going to live together. I actually have wondered if Chad did want that, but this points out that this is another case. It's not unlike others. Here is polygamy being introduced into this cult of Chad and Lori, and they didn't seem to care about their spouses that were still alive.
Yeah. Mindy, do you want to comment on this clip?
I think it's really fascinating. I can't imagine that anyone who's listening, particularly jury members, of course, we don't know the religious affiliation of jury members, but I think there's probably a good chance that a few of them are LDS, active mainstream LDS. And it was just so bizarre to hear them talking about going to the LDS temple, as many mainstream members do, but then going off to some part of the temple that obviously isn't in a traditional sealing room of the temple, but where they're going off into the temple and performing these, their own ordinances where they're sealing each other to each other. It's so bizarre. But I agree with you, Gerardo, that perhaps that's how Melanie was able to justify watching this relationship between Lori and Chad develop, because she truly believed that that it was sanctioned by God because they had been married in a previous probation or life. We see later on in her testimony that she starts to question that. And, when things start going really south, I think she starts to question the validity of all of that. But at the time, I think she truly did believe that. And maybe that's why she felt okay supporting the relationship between Lori and Chad.
Yeah. Really interesting. Brenton, do you want to comment on Melanie's testimony?
Just quickly, from a lawyer's perspective, these witnesses are often they're difficult and they're double-edged swords. So on the one hand, if Melanie's being more honest about the things that she believed, and that can be difficult for the jury to trust someone who would believe things like that. But then on the other hand, when she backs away from those beliefs and that doesn't seem credible, it also makes them struggle to trust her. Like, these are just difficult witnesses, and a lot of high, profile murder cases involve witnesses like these where they're not ideal witnesses, but they're all the state has to prove the case. And then this is more of a personal point. I think you see a pattern in fundamentalist Mormonism where the rules are for suckers. In fundamentalist and more extreme Mormonism, especially for the leaders, like the rules are for the followers, the rules are for mainstream members, and if you're influential or a leader in a fundamentalist sect, the rules are for suckers at the end of the day.
Right. Yep. Yeah, it's true. And just to end our summary of this week, and please feel free to jump in, Laura. Oh, John is joining us from his car. No, he's not joining us. Feel free to jump in, Lauren and Mindy, if you guys want to comment on anything else that you observed or that jumped in to you. I think it would be worth mentioning the Patriarchal Blessing, and just maybe we shouldn't play the clips because that will take long. But let's just talk about what that was. It was an audio that was played during the trial. And Lauren, do you want to just give us a background of what this Patriarchal Blessing audio was?
Yeah, and I do think we should play some clips. I don't know if everyone else needs to go, but for me, listening to this Patriarchal Blessing Thursday right before court ended was a very chilling, overwhelming moment for me. I had read the Patriarchal Blessing that had come down in some FOIA documents, and it was chilling then. to read what Chad Daybell was telling Alex Cox and this alleged patriarchal blessing he gave him. But then we learned in court that there was also a recording because, Chad and Lori's self-importance is so grand that not only were they going to write this down, they were going to record it for us all to listen to in court 3 years later. And it was November 24th or 25th, 2019 that Chad Daybell gave this patriarchal blessing to Alex Cox. And of course, Chad is not a patriarch, nor has he ever been a stake patriarch in the church, but he also gave the blessing on behalf of the Church of the Firstborn. I think what was most chilling is that it sounded so real. Chad was crying. His cadence was very much like a stake patriarch, although for me, it did have some serious Warren Jeffs vibes. I saw the manipulation. It was interesting. It was brought forth from the prosecution, but I actually thought it might help the defense a bit, because if you want to know if these people believe this, listen to this patriarchal blessing. And then, you can play the clips. I don't want to give too much away, but some of the things that Chad stated about Alex and the future were also very chilling. And I'll, just share that Alex Cox did pass away less than a month later, so it was a bizarre moment for me. Mindy knows. She was sitting next to me and I was whoa.
Yeah. Well, I think the vote is that we should play a couple clips and we've prepared a couple, so we're prepared to share. Just to give a little bit of background on what a patriarchal blessing is. A patriarchal blessing, in Mormonism, most worthy men in the church, that attend church and follow the rules and live according to the church's teachings, have something that the church calls the priesthood, which is the power the church explains as the power of God to act in his name. And then men are encouraged to use this priesthood to give blessings to people, and it could be blessings like to heal a person who's sick, or a blessing for encouragement. But then there's also this set of blessings which are called patriarchal blessings, and these blessings are given by a specific person in the congregation, which is it's a lifetime calling. It's called the person is called a patriarch, and this person is in charge of giving every member of the congregation, usually a stake, that wants one of these blessings. This patriarch gives that blessing, and again, it's called a patriarchal blessing, and it's supposed to be like a guide for their life. It's kind of like what Jesus or God wants from this person for their lives, and they usually end up touching on the same points. Most patriarchal blessings in the church, like the person's gonna go on a mission, the person is gonna get married, they're gonna have kids, they're gonna be faithful in the church. What's interesting about this is that, Chad Daybell was not a patriarch, so he would have had to have part of his his own beliefs that somehow he got the permission or authority to give this kind of blessings. And so he offered one to Alex, who's Lori's brother. And so this is the blessing that Lauren just talked about. And let's play one of the clips for that and listen to it. Let's go.
You already assisted us in ways that can never be repaid. You will continue to do so as you move forward in this life. You were born into a family that needed you desperately, with a set of parents who spoke of the gospel with their mouths, yet did not live it. And once again, you were reunited with a sister who needed you to survive such an environment.
So I would like Lauren to talk about what was interesting about this part of the blessing. Oops. One second, Lori. It seems like you're muted.
I was. Sorry about that.
Okay.
At this point in the blessing, Chad is talking to Alex, and Lori's there. Lori's present during this blessing. You can hear her voice at the beginning, and we also learned that Zulema Pastena was also there. She was another person that testified. And so at this point, Chad Daybell is referring to Lori and Alex's family of origin, their parents and their siblings, and he's essentially telling them that their family of origin, their parents did not live the gospel, that they had this kind of terrible upbringing, but they had each other, and that Alex was placed on this earth to for Lori and Alex to have each other to get through this, and that they were more righteous than the rest of their family, and that Alex, and then it goes on to say Alex is her protector, and that's essentially his sole purpose on earth, for Alex to be his sister's protector over her. I mean, whoa, so yeah. And this is after everyone's been murdered, by the way. This is after that he's giving this blessing. So I think that, we realize that's one of the things he probably did tell Alex, or that Alex thought that he was everyone's protector, or supposed to be this person that did these terrible things in the name of righteousness.
And there's this wording at the beginning of the clip of "you've already helped us in ways that can't be repaid," or some wording like that.
Yeah, tasks.
Yeah, Mindy, what do you think about that?
That's what I was going to point out. That's really stood out to me. You've already assisted us in ways that can never be repaid. I think we can all read between the lines there, because this blessing does take place after all of the deceased people have been murdered, and the children and the spouses. And so I think it's connecting the dots there. I think that might be what he's referring to there.
Yeah. Brenton, do you have any thoughts?
No, it was very creepy.
Okay, let's play one more clip of the Patriarchal Blessing.
You'll be known throughout the world for your good-heartedness, your willingness to save souls all over the world through portals, and you will begin to gather the souls that come unto Christ. I see you in New Jerusalem, but more importantly, I see you as a messenger of the Lord.
Yeah, just this language that it's a very Mormon language, but also morphed with some language and words that I've never heard before used in the Mormon context, like portals. What are you guys' thoughts on that, Mindy?
I just think that's what makes it so strange, because it does in many regards sound like a typical Mormon blessing, kind of the cadence of Chad's voice, and some of the same words and phrases that might be heard in a typical LDS blessing, but then to insert things like portals and some of these bizarre things, it's so unsettling and creepy, as Brenton said. I would agree.
What are these portals that he seems to mention, Lauren?
Well, there's a variety of people talking about portals, from Julie Rowe to Chad to Lori. And when it comes to this group, there's a variety of definitions. I thought it was interesting that he said travel through portals. We do know that Lori had a portal at her house, and Chad had I think in her closet, Chad had a portal. Was it in his closet too, Mindy? And that they would go to the portals to while she was in Arizona and he was in Idaho to visit one another. So there was definitely like portal traveling in some of Chad's books, which I've read too many of Chad's books, but reading any of them is reading too many. But he refers to portals as sort of a way to get to like sort of another dimension or another creation or another world. And I don't want to think about what Lori and Chad were doing in their separate closet portals, but portals were talked about by Zulema too, and it's a big part of this belief system, right up there with zombies. So portals.
Just really kind of bizarre. This ideas of and then you kind of wonder, like, I mean, because obviously in the physical world, this communication, in the closet with another person in a different state, probably doesn't happen, right? But how can someone convince themselves that that it's actually working, to the point where they're practicing it as regularly? I just I it's really hard for me to grasp. But again, people point out to other things in Mormonism, in the Mormon church history. It is like, oh wow, how could this have happened? You kind of wonder, like, is this how Martin Harris maybe saw the angel as well? Is this how other people, receive confirmation of polygamy and stuff like that? Like, like humans can have sometimes impressionable minds and believe this kinds of stuff, and seeing it happening in the 21st century in 2023, it's not as far-fetched to think about it with people believing this kinds of stuff also 100 200 years ago.
Yeah, I want to say something, or
Yeah.
is that okay? Something else that you just have to be honest and admit what was really hard for me to hear this patriarchal blessing. I think every person that's Mormon in that room, and when I say Mormon, I mean active Mormon, Jack Mormon, ex-Mormon, anyone with a Mormon background, I think is listening to this blessing. And for me, as a Mormon myself, it just shows what spiritual and religious manipulation is. I think back at the patriarchal blessing that I received when I was 14, that could sound so similar, that was supposed to be such a good thing in my life, and that was a good thing in my life, as a minor, and just how just that the power and nature of belief, and how people can really manipulate and hurt people in religion. And it made me sad. It created a lot of emotion in me that I'm still processing this weekend after hearing it.
Yeah, because you would think that the same mechanism, Chad is doing this. You have to wonder if he's actually believing it, or or lying to people that he believes it. But there's obvious people in the room who are actually believing it, right? And believing that these words are coming from God. And what's the difference between that and then like a patriarch?
Right. What's the difference?
Right.
What's the difference? And Mindy said something interesting after listening to it too. Mindy, do you like? I thought your reaction was interesting too when we were sitting next to each other. Our reactions were both a little different, but
do you want to share?
I can't quite remember what.
Yeah,
we talked about it for quite a while afterwards. So go ahead with what you remember.
Sure. Yeah, the first thing you said to me is, if I had any doubt that they believe this, or that Lori believed this, that is now gone.
Yeah,
that's true. I really felt I feel bad even calling it sincerity, because it's just so bizarre, but hearing Chad give that blessing to Alex, and it was just hard to deny that. Like, I think he really felt sincere about what he was saying. It cleared up some of my doubt. I'm still not 100% sure. I guess we never will be, but to think that I really do think he believed. I think he believed he had this power, and that he had these spiritual gifts, and I don't know, he could be a really, really good faker, but it seemed sincere. And to echo a little bit of what Lauren said, it made me ponder my own patriarchal blessing, and just how different those feelings can be, in these different contexts. But like, I loved my blessing, and I thought it was a really big moment in my life. So it just made me sad. I've had a lot of feelings. I haven't thought a lot about my patriarchal blessing in a long time, and I did this weekend. It was just really interesting to hear Chad's version of that compared to my own, and possibly the jurors or other members of the courtroom.
Right. Yeah, and I think this is a good way to transition to the last part of this week's trial, which was Zulema's uh, Pastines. Is that how you pronounce it, Lauren?
Pastenis.
Zulema Pastena's testimony, which I think was some of the most bizarre part of the testimonies, given when they're talking about what actually happened during that time. And we have Zulema, who was Alex's wife for 2 weeks before he died. And she was part of all of this, throughout. Again, like we mentioned, she was there. She was one of the ones present at the time of this patriarchal blessing. She was at several of these rituals that Lori was guiding and Chad was directing as well, of doing castings to, take away or remove demons that had possessed people, specifically Charles, who was at that time Lori's husband. And in this part, she is asked, like, how could she believe all this stuff? And her response was really interesting. So let's listen to that clip. That's a picture of Lori, and then Zulema is on the right. Let's see.
Yes. So that information, that conversation and information she had was in people's mind going into the casting on Charles.
Yes.
Okay. During this meeting at your house, did you all believe her that what you were doing had value?
Yes.
Okay. You say that very certainly. Why?
Lori is very convincing, vivacious way of expressing things, are very charming and believing, plus the fact that she had expressed before that she had been visited by all these heavenly beings. Therefore, if someone is telling the truth about that, I wouldn't be questioning them. I would be believing they're telling the truth, because I would never think that someone would lie about something as sacred as that.
Yeah, that part was really hit me hard, because it just reminded me of my mission in Mexico. When I was a missionary there, and we would tell people, usually people who didn't have access to an education, or didn't know a lot about current events in the world, and we would come and tell them about the story of Joseph Smith, or the Peter, James, and John given the priesthood and that kind of stuff. They believed it, because we were talking about Jesus, we were talking about God. And I remember this phrase that would come up frequently, of people saying, well, why would someone like the investigators would say to us, well, why would someone lie about that? And it just reminded me about basically what Zulema is saying here. I would like to hear what Mindy thought about this.
I'm sorry. Will you repeat what you were saying?
Good. So
Gerardo?
this Zulema's testimony on why she believed Lori about all these things, being sealed by Moroni and Jesus Christ, and the castings, and the demons and the devils and all that stuff.
Yeah, the whole Zulema testimony, there's so much. And of course, we won't have time to go through all of that. It is interesting for people to check out afterward. But I just think that Zulema was just a really impressionable, maybe insecure person who was obviously very spiritually minded, and I think her intentions were originally good. I don't want to defend her too much. I know I'll probably get crucified for defending her, but I just think she was really impressionable. I think she wanted so badly to feel important. I think that she saw Lori and Chad as the cool kids and wanted to be part of their group. So when they welcomed her in and started teaching her all these extra things, I think it just fed her ego, and she I think she kind of dove in wholeheartedly, and I think that her situation before was probably right, as many of these players were right for being ready to hear some of these really bizarre and out there things, because she'd already been kind of swimming in those waters of end times belief and those types of things. So yeah, Zulema's testimony, especially considering her experiences with Alex, I don't know if we'll get into all that today, but she has some really interesting things to say about the final weeks of Alex's life and her experiences with Alex and Chad and Lori.
Yeah. Lauren, would you like to just tell us, we don't have any audios, but would you like to just tell us about what were interesting highlights or things that you didn't know? I know Zulema hadn't spoken out publicly like Melanie had before. So a lot of this testimony, is my understanding, was kind of new. Is that right, Lauren?
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, yes, she has never spoken out. She's never given a testimony, but we do have from some FOIA docs. We've seen police interviews with her from in Arizona. So, from the police station, they came out as evidence. And I will say that her story in those police interviews and today stayed the same. I think she was a little bit more articulate today and a little bit more clear. And she clearly, they spoke with her about what they wanted her to emphasize on the prosecution, but her story did stay the same. And I did feel she was more forthcoming than Melanie Gibb. And maybe it was sort of just this difference between going from Melanie Gibb to Zulema. Melanie Gibb pretends that she just can't remember anything, where Zulema was like, this is what happens at the castings. They all hold hands. They all are in charge of saying something different to each other. Then they have to seal the casting through the proper authority to get rid of the spirit from the first person that they did the casting on was Charles, who was inhabited by evil spirit named Garrett. And then once they got rid of Garrett, then a worse, more powerful evil spirit came in. According to Chad, she taught us that it was always Chad kind of saying these things named Ned. And then once they got rid of Ned, it was Epelos. And then that's when they decided to kill Charles. Zulema, going to what the recording you played, I just want to say, oh, I'm echoing all of a sudden, was really powerful in that Zulema is saying what a lot of people feel. Why would anyone not believe? Why would anyone lie about seeing Jesus Christ like Lori did? And I also just want to emphasize that. But there is the question, and I think it's the question everyone has is Lori lying about seeing Jesus Christ? Or does Lori believe she saw Jesus Christ? I hope all of us here don't believe she actually saw Jesus Christ. So which one is it? But was it a lie? Was it delusional? Was it just the nature of belief and believing in something so strongly that you convince yourself? I think that what Zulema is saying is, why would you not believe someone who tells you that? The other interesting thing about Zulema is, she married Alex Cox. So in that Patriarchal Blessing, Alex Cox is told by Chad that he will marry a woman and that he will know when it's time for him to go to the other side. Minnie felt that it was a bit of a really eerie sort of suicide type part of this blessing. And he did die less than a month later unexpectedly, but not until he married Zulema Pastena in Las Vegas. They eloped. They got married. It is believed that was somewhat of an arranged marriage, and they moved to Arizona. And the morning that Alex died, and I want to reiterate, we said this, that the autopsy stated that he died of natural causes by a pulmonary embolism, but that morning he did receive a blessing from Chad, who was in Hawaii. Earlier that week, he had gone to Mexico over the border and purchased some prescription drugs. We don't know all those are. There were some really eerie things leading up to Alex's death, and it was right after he married Zulema. And in this patriarchal blessing, it does state that he'll know when to go to the other side, and that he'll have an eternal family after he leaves there. That and that is there, and will marry a wonderful, powerful woman. So Zulema really, I think, finally brought home what happened exactly at the castings, these exorcisms, let's call them, how she sort of ended up with Alex, who the inner circle was. It's actually more than Zulema and Melanie Gibb. We learned of a women named Nicole and Serena, and these preparing a people events and these firm expos. I've attended one of them where people are learning this sort of extreme beliefs. And then she really, I feel like the one thing Zulema carried home and what the prosecution emphasized was how this sort of cult, they didn't call it a cult, I'm calling it a cult, but how this cult or this group was formed. And then there was one more thing I wanted to say that was really important. Oh, the fall guy. So I love what Brenton said, that how important this fall guy piece is, to say that Alex told Zulema that he was perhaps a fall guy. The first time you did hear this was in a police interview that Zulema shared with police, and you can watch that on this police footage. But she stated it again, just the same story, that as Tammy's body was getting exhumed December 11th, 2019, Chad and Lori called and said, Tammy's body is being exhumed. And Alex was quiet, and Zulema asked Alex, did you have something to do with this death? Tell me, what's going on? What's happening? And Alex responded to her, I think I might be their fall guy. And then Zulema continued to push him. What do you mean? Why are you, what do you mean their fall guy? And he was quiet and wouldn't really answer her. And then he finally stated, I'm either a man of God or I am not. And that was sort of where the prosecution left it for the day and the things to ponder on. And that was what Zulema's testimony was about. So there you go.
Oh, thank you.
A long summary.
Yeah, thanks for that summary. I thought that was really important testimony and really quite bizarre. I did wonder at points, like, what is the purpose for the prosecution to bring all these details on what the castings mean and what the castings are, how they were performed, what does a zombie mean, I mean, I would I would think that most of us don't believe in any of that. So why is it important to explain all that in the trial? Brenton, do you have any thoughts?
My main guess is that there's a lot of legal rules that try to prevent lawyers from bringing up evidence that's just meant to make someone look weird, like just meant to assassinate their character, or evidence rules try to sanitize evidence, make it they try to set boundaries on what is acceptable and what's not. But in a case like this, you're allowed to talk about really anything that has to do with the story, like with the events that lead up to the crime. And so the prosecution has full reign to talk about all of this in as much detail as they want, really. And I think they're going to say that they're just telling the story, but one reason to bring all these details in is to look at the jury and say, this woman is insane. This woman believes wild things. This woman believes wild things and is willing to do wild things. I think that's the point. Mm-hmm. A person who's willing to believe all of that, manipulate others into believing it, is willing to do what we're accusing her of doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I was wondering, I believe at some point they're bringing pieces of of her journal into evidence. They're bringing in drawings that she made or Lori made about different worlds or different creations and stuff like that. Is that right, Lori?
Yeah, Zulema they brought in charts,
Right.
which actually at first looks similar to maybe a Plan of Salvation chart that you see in, Sunday school, but although it was drawn with like ink and, on
Yeah.
paper. And, so what is this? They decided. And then it went, my tweets even got bizarre. It went into, there are 5 different creations with 6 different worlds, and I lived 5 different times, but Alex was a first creation, but then I guess he did live with someone else. And I was once, Chad or I was once Lori's daughter in one life. I mean, and you're like, it just looked like this scribbles on a paper. And she's like explaining these things in detail. And it's going over your mind, and it's mind blowing. I tried to make sense of it because I want to make sense of this, and it was beyond me.
Yeah, really, really interesting. Well, like Lauren said, that concluded the Friday testimonies, and it was adjourned. There won't be the hearing won't be happening on Monday, but it will resume on Tuesday. So if there's enough interest in this series, we are planning on putting one of this together once a week and covering what's going on Lori's trial. And I would like Mindy, Lauren, and Brenton just to give us your final thoughts on this week, what you experienced. And Brenton, I know, although you didn't listen to the whole thing or didn't experience it, just your overall thoughts of our today conversation. Mindy, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. Yeah. It was just a really interesting experience to be up in Boise and be in the courtroom. There's so many things that were discussed that, of course, we can't cover all the topics here, but I would suggest people going back and checking out some of the video, the audio stream of what happened. I feel one of the things that we didn't talk about that I found was really impactful was when Zulema was talking about her journal entries and her little drawings. She mentioned that Chad did believe in some of his former lives that he was part of the Godhead of Mormonism, or what Mormonism believes the Godhead to be, Jesus Christ, Heavenly Father. And he believes that he was once the Holy Ghost and that he was a brother to Jesus in a previous probation. So I just think that shows kind of where Chad's mentality and where he kind of listed his importance in the whole scheme of things. Just such a sad story. My heart goes out to the victims and their families, and the Woodcock family and the Vallow family that had to be in the courtroom this week, especially during the testimony about the children's remains. That was really heartbreaking, and just so many things that came up this week. It will be interesting to see where the trial goes from here. I will be following closely, as I'm sure many others will as well. So thank you so much for having me on today.
Yeah, thanks, Mindy. Thanks for making time and being with us. And I know you reviewed the slideshow before and preparing for this and your time. Thank you so much. Brenton, do you wanna go next?
Sure. Like you said, I didn't get to watch the whole trial the whole week, but I just think it was interesting to see the themes and the narratives that each side chose to go with in their opening statement. I'm interested to see. I don't know. I'd like to see the choices. I like to see the choices of what the state does and does not do. I'm interested to see whether Lori decides to testify or not, whether the defense decides to present a very specific, different story, or mostly focus on what the state does not have as evidence. Try to emphasize to the jury that they should just feel that the state doesn't have enough. I think it'll be interesting to see where all of that goes. And I am always interested in these examples of the mainstream church just losing its grasp on members and on these outside boundaries. So excited to see more.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Brenton. Lauren, please, if you don't mind, just give us a summary of again of what you experienced, what were your thoughts were to conclude, and also please don't forget to plug your podcast and what you guys are doing to cover this, so people can tune in.
Thank you, Gerardo. I appreciate that. You know, I went to this trial again knowing a lot about this case and the victims. I see Kresha in chat, by the way. Kresha is the aunt of JJ, and, you know, she was in court as well. I can't imagine being the victims and family members watching this. Despite knowing so much and feeling so much already about this case, it was still very overwhelming to be in court and watching so much and seeing these people and listening to them and the testimonies and learning new information. I think there was a lot of new information this week. No matter how much you've studied this case, there was a lot to take in. And there's a lot to process. I think that, like I said, I'll never forget Tuesday when they showed autopsy photos. It made it all so much more real. And it is such a sad story. It is such a tragedy to hear that Chad really did think he was a deity, not just like a prophet type, but a deity, you know, to say he was the Holy Ghost and the brother of Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ, which doesn't make too much sense since they're father and son. But according to Zulema, he thought he was the brother of both of them. To hear that, you know, it was going that far, to hear his patriarchal blessing, to see Lori, to see her showing some distraught emotions. It was heavy. It was really, really heavy. I'm grateful in an odd way to witness it, because I think I've been processing this case for 3 years. And so I hope that justice is served. I've been really grateful for Brenton. I have so many questions for attorneys as I watch this. So thank you. I'd love to talk further with him. For those that want to follow this trial along with us, we do have a podcast, Hidden True Crime. I am behind though because of all I'm doing here. So most of the things I'm doing are on Twitter and YouTube as of right now. So I'm live tweeting during court for like 7 hours at twitter.com/hidden true crime every day in court. And then during lunch, I'll get on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/hidden true crime. And I give a brief lunch live of what is going on. And this is the latest. And then right after court adjourns, I rush back and wait for the court to send the audio. And the moment the audio comes down, we live stream it together, or not live stream it. We stream it as soon as it comes down on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/hidden true crime. We're also pulling up old episodes. I've done numerous interviews on this case through the past 3 years. People that believe Chad Daybell, people that call this a cult and were there, people that knew Lori. And I actually do want to say I have a couple of interviews scheduled tomorrow, so they're still coming. This case means a lot to me in a strange way, because I don't feel like something like this should have ever happened, and it should never happen again. And it's personal to me too, you know, having ties and roots in East Idaho, people I love in East Idaho, reporting East Idaho, family in East Idaho, and then this religion and this heritage that's so much a part of my life. I feel like I just want to understand it in a way that, or need to understand it for some strange reason. And so, I hope you all follow along. And I just wish the victims, my heart and prayers are with the victims watching this trial. It's very difficult.
Yeah. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you for that. Thank you for being with us. You're an expert on this case, and because you've been following it from the very beginning, and I'm really thankful that you were willing to join. And please, everyone, check out Lauren's YouTube channel to get the daily updates on the trial. Also subscribe to her channel as well. So please go and check it out and subscribe. I wanted to conclude by saying, this case has been fascinating to me from the very beginning. I think it really shows what can happen when people take this idea of personal revelation way too far, and I think it really helps. And I've seen it helped people really reconsider the idea of personal revelation and what does that mean to them. So again, it's a tragedy what happened to these children and other people, and yeah, like Lauren said, I really hope that justice is served. We will be covering this again if there's enough interest weekly, and I'll be your host on this and guide you through what happened that week. Please subscribe to the Mormon Stories podcast YouTube channel. Follow us on Instagram, on Facebook as well. Thank you if you're a donor, thank you for your donations. That really helps to keep Mormon Stories alive. And I just want to say, like John always says, please be good to each other. And we'll see you next on another episode of Mormon Stories podcast. Bye, everybody.
See ya.